Now on view at the Portland Art Museum, Paul McCartney Photographs, 1963 through 64, Eyes of the Storm, is an unprecedented exhibition that reveals extraordinary photographs taken by the beloved musical icon. Featuring recently rediscovered photos from Paul McCartney's personal archive, more than 250 pictures invite visitors to intimately experience the Beatles' meteoric rise from British sensation to international stardom. Curated by MPL and the National Portrait Gallery in London. Tickets and information at portlandartmuseum.org. Celebrate the best of our city's plant-based dining scene this Sunday at Circle V Portland. It's an all-inclusive walk-around tasting event featuring 10 chef collaborations from top vegan restaurants. So chefs from spots like Boxcar Pizza and Mama Doot, they'll be working together creating mashup dishes. Plus, there's going to be 14 beverage makers, even one of those giant grazing tables full of snacks. And the whole thing is a benefit for the nonprofits Growing Gardens and Urban Gleaners. It's all happening at Castaway Portland on September 22nd. Get your tickets today at circlevportland.com.
What's 2FA security on Kraken? Let's say I'm captaining my soccer team, and we're up by a goal against, Soda Springs FC. Do we relax? No way. Time to create an extra line of defense and protect that lead. That's like 2FA on Kraken, a surefire way to keep what you already have, safe and sound. Go to kraken.com and see what crypto can be. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Interactive Inc., PWI DBA Kraken. View PWI's disclosures at kraken.com/legal/disclosures.
Every September, thousands of people gather at Chapman Elementary School in Northwest Portland to see one of our city's most iconic annual events. That's because a few weeks each fall, the school's chimney becomes home to the largest known roost of migrating Vaux' swifts in the world. There can be as many as 16,000 birds swirling through the sky on any given night. But where do they come from? Why do they choose this school? And how do they all fit in that chimney? Well, today on CityCast Portland, Joe Liebezeit of the Bird Alliance of Oregon is here to answer all of our questions. It's Monday, September 16th. I'm John Notarianni in for Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Let's start at the beginning. What is a Vaux' swift?
A Vaux' swift is a small bird that's really built for speed. They're very aerodynamic. Some people have heard of them as a cigar with wings. So they have this, they have this short, stout body, very small bill. Their tail is kind of stubby and rounded. And then they have these really long wings that are swept back and pointed. And so they're just built for doing pretty much everything on the wing. They eat flying insects. So they're catching them as they fly in the air. They mate on the air. They come down to drink water.
They mate while flying.
They mate while flying, yes. The only time they come into land is when they need to rest or nest.
So they're really fast. They spend a lot of time in the air. Is there anything else unique about their behavior?
Well, I think one of the things we're going to talk more about is the fact that they use chimneys nowadays to roost in during the fall and spring migrations.
Why do they come to Portland each year?
Yeah, well, like many other migratory birds, they're a long-distance migrant. So they actually winter down in Central America, Southern Mexico, and even into Northern South America. And then they fly up the coast, the Pacific Flyway, we call it, along the West Coast. They get into the Portland area in the spring, in April or so. And they're actually here all spring and summer. People don't see them as much because during that time of the year, they pair up together and they'll nest in small chimneys at residential homes and other places. And then when the young hatch later in the summer, that's when they start getting to the point where, okay, it's August now. We need to start thinking about heading south for the winter. And that's when they start to amass in these large groups. And that's when people really notice them, especially at the Chapman Elementary School, where you can have thousands and thousands of swifts every night gathering to roost in the chimney as they start to make their migration southward.
Interesting. So they are living in chimneys around Portland, let's say, for a lot of the year. Like all summer, you might have like a couple swifts in a chimney here, a couple in there, and then they all kind of come together at this time of year. Why do they all come to this school? I mean, it's this one school, Chapman Elementary, which is everybody knows that this is the school that they come to. But like, why this one? What's so cool about this chimney?
Well, there's a bit of mystery around it, which makes it interesting. There are other chimneys up and down the West Coast that they do utilize in large numbers. But by far in Oregon, the Chapman Elementary chimney for many years has been a place that can have as many as 15 or 20,000 Vaux swifts spiraling into it to roost for the night. We're not sure exactly why they hone in on the Chapman chimney. It could be where it's located along their migratory pathway. It might just be a good place that they can stop for the night. They're traveling during the day and migrating from different parts of their breeding range. So some of the birds that you're seeing at the Chapman chimney may be birds that nested in British Columbia, and they're traveling a few hundred miles down here, and they see the Chapman chimney, and it's a place they see other birds gathering. And they go there, but it could be near some of their foraging habitat. We do have forest park nearby. We do have other cues along the river. Some birds migrate along river corridors. So there are a lot of unknowns about why exactly they use this particular chimney. And there's other places along their flyway where they'll use a chimney for several years, and then all of a sudden they don't use it. And we don't really always know why.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, all right, these birds, they come from South America. They spread out all over the Northwest, and then they all come to Portland when they're getting ready to go south again for the winter. It kind of reminds me of like when you're visiting another town and you're like, oh, you're going to Portland? Like, it's this great chimney. You know what it is? It's like the McMenamins of Portland. It's like everyone's like, oh, yeah, I know McMenamins. I know that chimney. It's sort of just like the destination that all the out-of-towners talk about, right?
Yeah, and I think, that's a good point, because communication is something that we don't know a lot about in a lot of birds and a lot of wildlife in general. And, they appear together around the Chapman chimney in this kind of coordinated movement where it's almost like they have one mind together. And, we use the word murmuration, which is a cool word to describe this collective motion they have. And they basically form this little tornado of swifts that go down into the chimney. And there's a lot of mystery around how do they communicate at this kind of level to do that.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, I imagine most people have either seen it in person or have at least like seen a video of it. But like for those of us who are just like, what? Swifts? What's going on? Like explain how this works.
Yeah. So, if you haven't been to the Chapman Elementary School on a September evening, you get there. You'll see other people there gathered on the lawn at Chapman. You do this, after dinner time before it gets dark. And you'll start slowly at first seeing one or two swifts gathering up in the sky above. And then, it seems to be pretty quickly, all of a sudden you're seeing, 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, just a mass number of birds, these small little birds gathering above the chimney. And eventually at some point, they start to form this little vortex. They start kind of spinning around in this collected movement. And eventually it's almost like they make a decision, and they'll start swooping down towards the entrance of the chimney. And then it's almost like when you see those videos of penguins like jumping off the edge of the ice into the water where the leopard seal is waiting for them. Like they don't want to do it right away. So they're kind of waiting for that first one to do it. And once that first one goes in, they start going into the chimney, and you can like notice when they're going in the chimney because they're starting like almost backing into the chimney. They kind of put the brakes on their wings and they kind of start going down in the chimney.
So when they're doing that swirling, like what are they doing? Are they like checking out for predators? Are they like, because I know that sometimes there's like a hawk or like there will be like a predatory bird, which is real exciting. And then it like chases the swifts around for a bit. And then like maybe the swifts gang up on the hawk. Like what's going on there?
Yeah, well, there are a number of different kind of theories around why birds in general or why animals flock or herd together. And one of them is like the many eyes theory, where if there's a lot of birds around looking for predators, then they can kind of collectively avoid the predator. And also there's strength in numbers. So one or two swift may not be the lucky ones, but the others will all be successful in getting down to the chimney. And it is true. Often on a given night, you will have a Cooper's hawk or a peregrine falcon show up on the scene. And it's always fun in a way, maybe not so fun for the swifts, but for the people attending on the lawn, they'll, come in and the Cooper's hawk will maybe sometimes even land on top of the Chapman chimney, and you'll hear some boos, you hear some cheers.
Are there people on Team Hawk? Do people root for the hawk? That seems like very bad manners.
I don't know. I think there might be some of those out there. I just think people like the whole kind of spectacle of it all, like seeing how the Swiss will react to the presence of the hawk. And then the hawk sometimes will get a swift and pick it off and bring it to a tree. And as soon as it gets the swift, you'll hear some oohs and ahs from the crowd. So it's really, an amazing way in an urban setting. You could just sit there and watch an equivalent to the lion chasing down the gazelle on the Serengeti, instead you're looking up in the air at a similar phenomenon.
The Serengeti of Chapman Elementary School.
That's right. Right.
Something I've noticed when I've seen the swifts, sometimes there's a few that don't go into the chimney. What happens to them? Do they come back around later? Do they go and roost somewhere else? I'm always kind of worried about those straggler swifts.
Yeah, good question. Sometimes some of them don't go in the chimney and they fly off in the night. It's usually a very small number, and we're not exactly sure why they do that, because the chimney can fit quite a few birds. We've counted, like I said before, as many as 15,000 or more birds in a given night, and we presume that they fly off towards Forest Park or somewhere else to roost in a chimney or a tree for the night. Mm-hmm. But it's just another one of those mysteries of like, why don't they just all go in? Why are there a few that peel off and go off into the night? We really don't know.
Well, I have a lot more questions, but first, let's take a quick break. You've probably all seen the news by now about rising energy costs, right? It might be time to think about an alternative. So, here's a few options. One, you could design your own plutonium-fueled nuclear reactor, Back to the Future style, or you could just take advantage of the biggest fuel source in the solar system. Yeah, I'm talking about the sun. Solar panels can power your home with clean, renewable energy while also shrinking your bills and reducing your impact on the environment. And with smart battery storage, solar does even more. Like during power outages, you're going to have backup power for stuff like keeping your lights on and your refrigerator running. But the best news is that solar energy and battery storage qualify for cash incentives from Energy Trust of Oregon and a 30% federal tax credit. That means you could save thousands of dollars. Now, if you're not familiar, Energy Trust is an independent nonprofit organization that helps people and organizations save energy and adopt clean energy solutions. And the best way to get started with solar plus storage is to just request a free, no-obligation bid from an Energy Trust Solar Trade Ally at energytrust.org/citycast.
Your business deploys AI pilots everywhere. But are they going anywhere? Or are they stuck in silos, exhausting resources, unable to scale? Maybe you don't need hundreds of AI pilots, you need a holistic strategy. IBM has 65,000 consultants with Gen AI expertise who can help you design, integrate, and optimize AI solutions. So you're not just deploying AI, you're scaling it across your business. Learn more at ibm.com/consulting. IBM. Let's create.
Something else I've wondered, when they're going into the chimney, like we've all seen them go in and you cheer and it's real exciting. Like, how do they sit in the chimney? Do they cling to the bricks? I imagine they're not just in a clump at the bottom.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's actually some footage. There's a gentleman named Larry Schwitters who monitors some chimneys up in Washington, and he has some actual footage of the swifts in the chimney. So they perch with their little claws the inside of the bricks in the chimneys. And also on their tail, they have these little rigid spines, it looks like little spines on their tail that act kind of like a third leg and or a third foot almost. And so they could use that to prop themselves up. So when you see a picture of swifts in the chimney, you'll see all these little birds packed in like sardines in the inside of the chimney with their heads facing up, kind of just sitting there. And, another reason why we think they use the chimneys is thermoregulation, or that's another word of saying that's a way for them to keep warm in the chimney at night.
So you mentioned that they do sometimes roost at other chimneys. Is there ever a concern that one day they're just going to be we're done with Chapman? we're done with Portland. We're going to Boise. Like, like, is that a concern at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a chance that they won't use a chimney for whatever reason, but who knows? I mean, it's just, again, one of those mysteries. Sometimes they'll use a site for many years and then not use it, but it's been decades that they've been using that chimney consistently in large numbers. So we're pretty sure that they'll be around for a while. And actually, the school has invested in, not using the chimney. They have heat in the building, obviously, but that chimney has been decommissioned.
Did they do that specifically for the Swifts?
Yeah, and it was maybe 20 or more years ago. And it was in coordination with the Bird Alliance of Oregon. At the time, we were the Portland Audubon. We worked with PPS to ensure that they wouldn't get rid of the chimney and to refurbish it and to raise the money for that. So that's a bigger kind of conservation goal of ours, is that, the Swifts historically have relied on large, old growth trees that have been hollowed out from fire or from lightning strikes or from just decay over time that are still standing, where these birds have used, because, before European colonization of this area, there were no chimneys, obviously. And so the Swifts were using these old growth trees. And so we know that there's been a lot of loss of our old growth forests on the West Coast in the past century. The Swifts have been able to adapt to using human structures now. And so we want to make sure that not only do we protect our remaining old growth forests and we can connect people to help support us in those efforts, but also in the urban conservation landscape to help protect our remaining chimneys that are really important for these birds.
Yeah. Well, the Bird Alliance of Oregon, which you work with, you guys go out and do a nightly count of the Swifts at this time of year, every night. How the heck do you do it? How do you count thousands of birds?
Wildlife biologists all over the world are challenged by counting wildlife, especially in large numbers. So a method that we use, that is used kind of widely, is to estimate the numbers in blocks of birds, so 10 Swifts at a time or 100. And we use the little tallywhacker clickers as we sit on top of the hill to, once the birds start going in, to start clicking our clicker and tallying the number of birds in these blocks. And it takes practice. We'll train people on how the methodology we use to do the counts. Once we feel like the volunteers that are new are getting numbers similar to our more experienced volunteers, then we can call them an official Swift counter, and they can help with the count. And I do want to also to say that it is an estimate. There's a degree of error around these estimates by probably a couple hundred birds or more every night. But when you're doing it consistently using the same methodology, even though there is an error, the overall trend we can know over the years and over the timeline we do the count.
Yeah. And I understand you also have volunteers that are there to make sure that the counters don't get distracted, right?
Yeah, because as you can imagine, it takes a lot of concentration. Once those birds are going in the chimney, you really got to be focused. You have your binoculars in one hand and your clicker in the other. And if, a member of the public comes up to you and asks you a question, it's really hard. So obviously a big part of what we do is connecting with the public. So we want to make sure we have another person alongside the main counter to kind of field any questions that the public may have. And we also have in most nights, we have a whole other program at Chapman called Swift Watch, which is purely dedicated to outreach to the public. So we'll have a table set up down on the lawn of Chapman with several volunteers and sometimes staff folks that are just talking to people about all the things we're talking about right now.
Yeah. Well, we're talking on September 11th right now. What are the numbers looking like this year?
This year so far, the numbers are actually looking a little lower than normal. We've been getting 2,000 birds lately, 2,000 or 3,000 birds on a night. Typically by mid-September, we're getting upwards of 6,000 or 7,000 birds. So
we're really low this year. Yeah.
We're pretty low this year, and we're not sure if it's an anomaly. It could be birds are using other chimneys in the area more now and just not gathering in Chapman as much. It could be related to the predators. We're not sure. I mean, we have had several nights where we've had Cooper's hawk sitting on the chimney, just sitting there for like 45 minutes.
What a jerk.
And and the swifts have been circling around, just kind of waiting for it to leave, and eventually they go in. So, that could be a factor. I don't want to, in any way vilify the predators.
Yeah. poor Cooper's hawk just doing what it needs to do. Yeah.
Right. They have been eating other birds for millennia. So it is part of the natural cycle, but it's certainly something that could be influencing the swift numbers this year. But that's part of why we monitor. We monitor every year. We've been doing it since 2009, and we've had other years where the numbers have been lower. We've had years that have been higher. Another thing I want to point out is that the numbers that we count, every year we provide them to a person that maintains all the numbers across the whole West Coast. So they're not just people counting the swifts at Chapman. There's people down in the Bay Area. There's people in other parts of Oregon. There's people down in LA counting these birds as they go into chimneys during the migration period. And we compile those numbers, and it's a great way for us to understand in a bigger region-wide way how the swifts are doing, what their numbers are like, and the patterns that we're seeing with their population.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned conservation. Do we have any concerns about their population, about like the health of the species?
Yes, the Vaux's swifts are actually in decline. It's not enough to warrant it at currently a listing like on the Endangered Species Act or anything like that. But it is definitely a bird of concern in our region. Again, there is a long history of the removal of and timber harvest of large old growth trees. So that's probably a big factor in why we've seen that trend over the years, over the decades, in their decline. There could be other factors too, but we're definitely keeping an eye on them. That's part of the reason why we're doing those swift counts.
Well, I mean, we are in the heart of swift season right now. If somebody wanted to go and visit the swifts this year, I mean, obviously this is an estimate, but how much longer do you think they have?
Yeah, so it's all September, so you can go out on any night. It tends to peak in mid-September, so right now is a great time to go out to Chapman Elementary and see the swifts going into the chimney. But yeah, it'll be happening up until the beginning of October. And on nights where it's rainy, it's typically not as good and not as good for the people either. But But yeah, this is a great time right now to go to see the swifts.
Yeah, I mean, and other than not bothering the swift counters, which just sounds so rude, what advice would you have for first timers if people have never been before?
Yeah, I would say, you want to be respectful of the people and the birds. We did have an issue, and this isn't from the people watching the birds, but we did have an issue of someone flying a drone around the chimney.
No.
And it was obviously disturbing the birds as they were getting ready to go in the chimney. This is a bigger issue for us, is that drones are perceived by a lot of birds as a predator, as another bird that's competing with them or disturbing them.
For sure.
And so that caused a lot of concern. And we actually got in touch with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they were concerned as well. But what I would say for people, if they're visiting Chapman, is to, come lay out a blanket. It's a great family thing to do. A lot of kids like to go down on cardboard.
Yeah, cardboard sledding.
That's all good, but we just want to make sure that people really pick up after themselves after they leave, because we have had some complaints from people that live in the neighborhood and from the school that there's some trash left behind. So just go ahead and enjoy the spectacle, but please be sure to bring your cardboard and whatever else you bring to the site home with you when you're done. And parking can be an issue. There have been some places that businesses that have allowed parking to be allowed there. I actually need to look at our website for that. So
awesome. Yeah. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes on this episode. So Joe, last question. I'm a big fan of the swifts, but sometimes I don't feel like leaving my house. Do you think that if I were to build an even bigger chimney in my own backyard, like just a giant chimney, that I could get them to come to my house instead of Chapman Elementary?
Well, people have actually tried something like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, down in, I can't remember if it was Salem Audubon or Corvallis Audubon several years ago. There was a chimney down there that the swifts had liked to use for roosting, and that was knocked down. And so a few folks from the Audubon chapter down there worked to build an artificial chimney. And unfortunately, it didn't work. There's speculation on why it didn't work. It wasn't exactly, it didn't maybe have the brick like the old chimney did, or, certain the structures that the Swifts like, but the Swifts can be pretty finicky.
It didn't have that Chapman Elementary je ne sais quoi.
Yeah. And so I would say that, though, for a residential homeowner, if you do have a chimney and Swifts have used it, let the birds nest there. They'll be gone in a few weeks or a month. They might have some guano, some poop that goes down into your fireplace or what have you, but it's not an issue. And we encourage people not to block off their chimneys, because we want the birds to be able to use these structures for nesting. So,
well, you've derailed my plans to build a giant chimney in my backyard. I guess I'll be going out to Chapman Elementary with everyone else.
Sounds good.
Joe, thank you so much. And thanks for keeping us updated. Looking forward to seeing how the count plays out this year.
Yeah, really. Thanks for your time, John.
Well, that's all for us today here on CityCast Portland, but thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you told a friend about it or left us a rating or a review. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a lot more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.